Okay. 6.0, reconvene open session, procedural business, 5:30 p.m. 6.1, call to order. The Board of Trustees are hereby reconvening open session at 5:36 p.m. 6.2, roll call. Trustees to identify themselves by first and last name to formally establish quorum. Jordan Zarati, Trustee Area 3, Running Springs, Arrow Bear Lake, Green Valley Lake.
Cindy Gardner, Trustee Area 2.
Natalie Lindeman, Trustee Area 2.
Dana Ridlin, Trustee Area 1.
Leslie Ramseth, Trustee Area 1.
Okay, we have our quorum. 6.3, Pledge of Allegiance, led by our Superintendent, Michelle Murphy. And Mr. Mark Bear, both of you.
Right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Michelle and Mark. 7.0, closed session report. 7.1, announcement of reportable actions taken during closed session. No reportable actions for 7.1 there. 8.0, public testimony. 8.1, public comment period for items listed on this agenda and non-agenda items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the governing board. The public comment period is administered by state law and is the point in the meeting set aside for members of the public to share their opinions with the board. Open meeting laws do not permit the board to engage in dialogue or answer questions. Though it may not take action on non-agenda issues raised at the public comment period, the board, for example, may refer any matters to the superintendent for review or take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Due to the modified meeting procedures with the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, if a member of the public would like to address the governing board on agenda and non-agenda items within the subject matter of their jurisdiction, an email should have been submitted to the executive secretary to the superintendent by noon today. Written comments will be read aloud and subject to the board's usual time limits for public comments. Decorum, the governing board is interested in the ideas and opinions of all stakeholders and endeavors to incorporate community views into its deliberations and decisions. At the same time, it must be able to conduct its business in an organized and efficient manner, free from material disruption. Therefore, in accordance with Board Bylaw 9323 and Government Code Section 54957.9, audience members may not disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of this meeting. Open meeting laws do not confer any privileges or protection for expression beyond that otherwise provided by law. The public's understanding and cooperation are appreciated. 8.2, audience members. We did receive some public comments, so I'll go through those. And our first one is from Victoria Wolfman, subject letter to the board. To who it may concern, my name is Victoria Wolfman, and I am a parent and instructional assistant of Rim Unified School District. I am asking you to please consider opening up with 100% students going back this August. I could list the many reasons on why to reopen, from how COVID-19 doesn't impact children as heavily as adults, to the real fact that many children will be left with siblings if we go back to distance learning. But I will just simply state to look at the number of cases up here in our community. As of Friday, June 19th, our community of over 30,000 people has only had 23 cases. That is 0.0007%. I consider that amazing. We are a very strong community who is there for each other. I'm asking you to please at least try to open up like normal. Obviously, have a plan B through Z if things change. These kids have already had 3 months of not being able to go to school. Don't make it any worse for them. They are strong mountain kids and they can overcome this virus. Thanks for listening. Sincerely, Victoria Wolfman, proud parent and employee of ROWUSD. So that's our first public comment. Our second one is from Tammy Pascarella. And here is what, let's see, did it have a subject matter? RIM School Board letter. Hello, Rim of the World Unified School District board members. Rim Scots Youth Football and Cheer has been an organization in the mountain community for over 50 years. We cater to the athletes in our communities by providing a safe and dedicated place to participate in tackle football and cheerleading. We are dedicated as always to provide a season in the fall for these athletes. We have been working closely with CYFA and AYF to adhere to all COVID-related regulations for tackle and cheer programs, and the steps we will be taking are listed below. We rely heavily on the Rim of the World Unified School District to allow us to practice and play at Rim of the World High School. As you know, there are limited options in our small community to practice or play up here on the mountain. We have been in contact with Rim Parks and Recreation Department. However, they have very limited space available on their fields this fall and nowhere for us to have game days. We are at the mercy of Rim of the World School District to approve our facility use form. Without it, we have nowhere to go. Our league is dependent upon a positive outcome with our request to use the fields, which is scary for us. The athletes that participate in this program are depending on us to make this season happen. In turn, we must depend on you. These athletes have been locked away for quite some time and really need this program to happen. On a side note, I happen to be the parent of a very active child who plays multiple sports throughout the year, often playing more than one sport at a time, and I can tell you he is chomping at the bit to get back out on the field or court. As a parent, I truly feel like the kids in this community need this program to happen. Please consider our request for an approved facility use form, and we thank you for your time and attention to this matter. Rim Scots Youth Football and Cheer. And they included also new regulations regarding COVID and youth participation. I'll go ahead and read those real quick here. All athletes, coaches, and volunteers will be scanned with a no-touch thermometer prior to entering the field for every practice and game. Should anyone record a temperature higher than the recommendation at the time the season starts, they will be taken to an isolation area where their parent or guardian can pick them up. Should an athlete become ill during practice, we will also isolate them and call a parent or guardian to pick them up. They will be monitored by a board member until their ride home arrives and to make sure they are safe during the process. All practices will be closed to parents or spectators. Each parent will drop their athlete off and leave the site immediately. Only athletes, coaches, and volunteers, equipment manager, athletic directors, and board members will be allowed on the fields. Also, all parents must remain in their cars when picking up their athletes from practices. All equipment will be sanitized after each practice before being used again at the next practice. Hand sanitizer will be made available on the field for all athletes, coaches, and volunteers. The wearing of gloves will be highly recommended. All home games will adhere to social distancing regulations and or close to fans depending on the recommendations in September when games start by the CDC. We have another one from Michelle Williamson. Subject matter, public comment to address the board for the June 25th, 2020 meeting. And here's what Michelle says. Members of the school board, Superintendent Michelle Murphy, and district leadership. This comment is being read on behalf of Michelle Williamson. I would prefer to address the board in person. Due to the circumstances, I will address my concerns on paper and have this read to you. I have been working for the RIM district for 14 years. I have been personally impacted by many financial cuts and decisions of the district. I've been affected by the school closure of Lake Gregory Elementary. I've been affected by the school closure of Grandview Elementary, and now the proposal MOU to cut classified jobs. Thus my reason for addressing the board tonight. With the MOU on the table tonight, if passed, I personally would incur a decrease in salary and cut from a 12-month position and demoted to my prior position with less work days, and would cause bumping to other classified members that would incur similar outcome, while another classified member would lose their job. I've determined it's nearly impossible to advance in this district. As you advance, it just seems you end up being bumped backwards again. As we are all experiencing, these are very different times we are currently in due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We should all be aware that for our schools to open safely and effectively, all classified staff should remain on board. With the recent information I've been provided by the Associate President of CSEA on the budget deal from Sacramento, for schools in the state of California for the 2020-2021 school year, I'm seeing protection for classified members under this budget deal. I'm concerned the school board would even consider approving this MOU to cut classified jobs in our district when we have the backing from our state legislature. Consider the state legislature's intent for protecting classified jobs. Please also consider the MOU you are voting on tonight, specifically would it affect jobs in the child nutrition and transportation departments. Transportation department affected due to seniority bumping. These departments were directly mentioned in the state budget, prohibiting cuts to these classifications. Again, we should all be aware that for our schools to open safely and effectively, we should keep all of our classified staff on board. Thank you for your understanding. I appreciate your no vote on the MOU eliminating classified jobs. Respectfully, Michelle Williamson. We have another public comment from Amanda Markovich. Subject statement. Odysseyware or computer-based instruction is a course that's offered at Rim High School for virtual and long-distance learning. The program has been successful on our campus for the past 6 years. The WASC team was thrilled with the way our virtual program operates. Part of the reason the program is successful is because we have a credentialed teacher in each subject matter working with the students in all lab, all periods of the day. The master schedule for the next year shows the CBI program being cut to 3 periods, and the plan is to have Mountain High teachers take on the RIM CBI students for English, history, and math. Mountain High teachers already have a full-time job and do not need to take over 100 RIM students. The reason for cutting the CBI class at RIM by half is to save money on teachers' teaching fifths or extra periods. I have been involved with this program since it started, and fifths will ultimately not be needed. What happens every year is kids transfer out of physical classes and are put into the CBI class within a few weeks. As the year progresses, students continue to get added for credit recovery purposes. The CBI classes at RIM are always full. RIM still has the same number of students, they are just transferring to CBI. Some of the current physical classes will dissolve as students transfer to virtual, hence there will be no need for fifths for more than a few weeks. If we could know which students planned on doing CBI before school started, we wouldn't need fifths for CBI at all. Only scheduling 3 periods of CBI now will lead to having to redo the master schedule as soon as school starts and will create a mess. Also, students who believe that they were taking CBI classes will be unscheduled and roaming the halls or wasting time in class that they don't plan on staying in. I also wonder what will happen to the multiple elective classes the high school offers in Odysseyware. I have a credential in psychology and teach several electives related to psychology on CBI. Will we still offer those classes, or will they be cut? Will a teacher from Mountain High be burdened by teaching these CBI electives even though they don't have the credential? Finally, I believe RIM students should have access to their CBI teachers on campus. We talk to our CBI students regularly, send them messages, call slips, and progress notes. It is not fair for student staff to call a teacher at a number, campus, to get their questions answered. And again, it is also not fair to the Mountain High teachers. Even if a student is full-time independent study, they are still required to come into the lab for tests. Cutting hours limits these students. Please urge the master schedule to have a full day CBI classes. The lab needs to be open every period at RIM High. Thank you, Amanda Markovich. We also have one other last public comment. It was submitted after our 12 o'clock deadline that we have, so I'm going to ask the board for a vote if we will allow the reading of this public comment submitted after the deadline.
I make a motion to accept the comment.
Second.
We have a first from Cindy and a second from
Natalie.
Natalie. Thank you. And any discussion? If none, calling for the vote, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. We'll go ahead and read the last comment that was received, and it was from Stacy Stinzel, subject, board meeting request. Here it is. Dear board members, colleagues, and community members, I am writing to you so that I may express my concerns over the elimination of classified positions in our district. I have worked in this district for numerous years and have seen many classified positions eliminated due to budget constraints, which I fully understand. Nevertheless, positions are currently being eliminated when there has not been a change in the financial budget for the upcoming 2020-2021 school year. This is public information and was provided to all of our classified staff members by our CSEA union president. Please see the attachment below. All the while, several classified employees have been reclassed and new classified positions were also created in the past month. Additionally, several new teachers have already been hired for our next school year during your planning processes. How can you hire all of these new teachers and have them in place without knowing what our numbers are going to look like in the fall, but eliminate classified positions when our funding has not changed? I knew when I took the position as administrative secretary at Rim High School that I was once again risking my seniority as a classified employee and could be bumped if there were positions eliminated. However, I did not anticipate the elimination of another classified position when our funding resources for the district have not changed and will not change for the 2020-2021 school year either. I want to know why this is currently occurring in our district. How can you justify the reduction of additional classified staffing? You just eliminated the guidance tech, a classified position at the high school, and replaced it with a higher paid counselor position. Yet, our student numbers do not reflect the need of another counselor when we compared with other districts within the state of California. I was told that of our classified jobs are being eliminated because of a, quote, lack of work, and others are being dissolved because of a, quote, lack in funding. How can you rationalize your decision to eliminate any classified jobs in this economic climate? There is not a lack of work as an administrative secretary, nor a lack of funding in the district's immediate future. Please take all classified employees' opinions into consideration as you contemplate eliminating yet another classified position this evening. The elimination of one job affects several of your employees and their entire families. I am hopeful that you'll be thoughtful as you deliberate your decision this evening. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Stacy Stinzel. And she did include an attachment of the California School Employees Association's news alert that she referenced in earlier on in her public comment. With that, we have completed all of our public comments, and we'll move on to 8.3, RTA and CSEA representatives. Do we have a representative for RTA at this time?
Yes.
Mr. Mark Bayer.
Yes, before I spoke about reopening plans, so I wanted to just take a moment to speak of the action calendar. Actually, I wanted to congratulate Ms. Murphy, Mr. Beal, and Ms. Haberlin for their contract extensions. And though there might be some people grumbling about it, I've been here a long time and seen a lot of management use RIM as a stepping stone to get to other districts, higher paying districts. So I just hope the 3 years because I'm not planning on staying for 3 years, that you'll be true to the district and keep communicating with us, build trust with all stakeholders. So, as we know, our last experience got ugly sometimes, and it's hard enough dealing with the county and states and all of the rules and bureaucracy that we have to deal with. So having a decent relationship with one another, I think, really helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baer. CSEA, I believe we have a letter from them to read this evening. I'll turn it over to Todd Beal.
Okay, so this letter is from Suzanne Groh, CSEA President, Chapter 417. The subject matter, Governor's Budget, Announcement, and Layoffs. So, to the Rim of the World Unified School District Leadership and School Board, I'm sure you have all heard the great news regarding the Governor's budget. At the bottom of this email, I've included the CSEA president's message that I referenced in this email. CSE headquarters has communicated information regarding the provisions of full funding for K-12 districts to receive the same state funding for next year as the year just ended. We were also informed that the budget deal also includes what is called legislative intent language that states that no district, no county office of education, no joint powers authority, and no college should lay off any of their classified staff for financial reasons. While this language does not carry the full weight of law, it does send a clear directive that the legislature intends state funding to be used to keep all existing classified staff fully employed. The budget deal also includes language that prohibits layoffs and releases for permanent and probationary employees in 3 sets of classifications: nutrition, transportation, and custodial. While this budget deal and legislative intent language, we recommend that the district not continue with the plans to lay off the child nutrition secretary. We are aware that the district can lay off for lack of funds, can't be used for an argument now, or for lack of work. There really is not a lack of work in that important department, as we stated in negotiations. If you learn about the work of the child nutrition secretary and spend some time in her office or speak with her, you will see that redistributing her work to several others who already have a full plate is not ideal in the district nor the child nutrition department. Much of the credit for the smooth operation in child nutrition is due to the 10 years of devotion of a highly qualified and talented child nutrition secretary. Don't take my word for it, and please feel free to do the homework and investigate the work of this position for yourselves. We, CSEA, are very concerned for the well-being of this department, and the board should be as well, especially with licensing requirements, regulations, and laws. We respectfully request that the school board not approve this layoff and have the district leadership and CSEA return to the negotiations table for further bargaining. Thank you, Suzanne Gross, CSEA Chapter President.
Thank you, Todd, and to Suzanne. With that, we'll move on to 9.0, governing board members' reports and announcements. 9.1, governing board members. Tonight we'll start with, how about Cindy Gardner?
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I'm gonna address the budget. We did get information from the state, a lot of emails that came to the board from CSBA, from AXA, from various different organizations with the budget and analysis of what that means for school districts. And while we got a quote-unquote win by not having a 10% reduction in education funding, in essence, we are getting the same exact amount of money, but we are not receiving the cost of living adjustment, a 0% COLA. So basically, we're getting exactly the same money, yet the cost of living increases are not going to be covered. That means everything from the increase of insurance, the increasing of salaries, step and column, those kinds of things that we must do, then also increased operational costs, all of those are going up. And we have not even gotten the cost of living. So when you talk about we get full funding, we've never gotten full funding. CSBA has been fighting for years for fair and full funding, and we do not have full funding for education. Although we did not get cut, nor did we get a cost of living increase to even begin to cover the increases of education. Then the other part that we need to be aware of is that the deal that's been reached, the compromise, is that there's an acknowledgement of the governor of taking the legislators, the Senate side, Senate and assemblies, that says that we're going to assume that the federal government is going to give us more federal relief on top of the CARES money that we've already received, basically. And that's going to happen. So we should be not getting the cuts right now. We should assume we're going to get additional federal relief. However, if we don't get that federal relief, in September, everybody's going to reconvene and they're going to have a chitty chat about, wow, look at what happened to income tax and the tax revenue that's supposed to be, we're supposed to be filing our taxes by July 15th. Did it come in as anticipated? Did it decrease? What did that do? Did we get our federal money, relief money, the second batch of it? Oh, that's being held out. No, we're not going to get it. we will get cuts after we start school if if everything doesn't line up. The other problem is that we were already planning for cuts based on declining enrollment. We have declining enrollment every year, and we have to make cuts. We're just not getting the revenue. We are not, I love the way Mr. Bayer always points this out. We are not the winners in the LCFF formula. So we are not getting the kind of concentration grant money that other school districts do. So we have those issues. We are not getting the same kind of revenue. We are in declining enrollment. That is the purpose of the budget committee that was set up, is to focus on where can we reduce our expenditures. And some of those do happen to be cuts. They've been being discussed within that committee of what kind of cuts do we need to make. Now, we've been spared from going really, really deep into those cuts, into those suggestions from the committee. We may end up having to do them after school starts. Maybe it's in October, maybe it's after January. We have no idea. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and nothing is guaranteed from this budget. We have a reprieve. We still, as a board, have to do our fiduciary responsibility by keeping this district in a positive position. And that has to deal with budget cuts due to declining enrollment and every single year, and due to the fact that we are not the winners of LCFF. Just because we're not getting that 10% doesn't mean that it's a total win. We are not getting a COLA. We are not getting that 2.31% at all. So we actually technically got cut again because we didn't get the cost of living adjustment, and there's no added money to the LCFF. So we are not in the same financial position as for next year as we were this year. We're just not. We're behind the 8 ball. And as such, the budget committee has done amazing work to try to come together to identify areas for reductions, for cuts, for changes in practices, for looking at things differently, reorganization possibly, but there's a lot of issues with this budget. So we need to be careful about calling this a win, because it wasn't really a win, in my opinion. I think it was a reprieve. And we need to count our blessings, and we have to thank the governor and thank our legislators for the break, for the reprieve, but we don't know how long this is really going to last. The other thing people need to know is that there are deferrals, meaning that our June monies that we would be paid in June, we aren't going to be paid until July 15th. You know, they're pushing when they pay us. So our district will have to basically take out loans to make sure we pay our bills. I'm super simplifying it, but that's the way it is. So loans, yeah, we're not getting paid for the interest. We're not. That's another hit to our budget. Then we have the fact that there are all these parameters around this budget that really hurt and tie our hands to be able to do our job effectively. Whether you agree with it or not, everything should be a local decision, local control. Look at our situation and make the decisions on our situation. Not every district is the same. The one good thing I'm going to say is a win that has no strings attached is that this is going to allow the sale of surplus district property to be spent on one-time expenditures, which is like, woohoo! Usually it's really tight. You only do it you can only spend your sale of property on facilities. Yes, our facilities need it, Jim, so don't get your panties in a wad. I'm just saying that, but at least we're given flexibility of where to use that one-time money for a one-time expenditure, which is brilliant. Thank you. Another win in this budget is the hold harmless ADA. We are not gonna be penalized next year on our ADA, the average daily attendance. They're extending that through next year, which gives us another reprieve, because if there's some changes in our enrollment due to coronavirus, we're not gonna have to do mass layoffs and then mass hirings back, at the end of this pandemic. So it, again, is a reprieve for us to be able to take a breath and not go into panic mode of trying to make these crazy adjustments in staffing due to the pandemic. We will be held harmless in ADA, which helps create stability in planning for the budget for even the following year, which is a good thing for every school district. So I mean, there's a lot more to digest in the analysis of the budget, but those are some things that I really wanted to point out, that we're not getting full funding. We never have. And I wanna make that clear. CSBA makes it clear. That's one of their platforms, is fair and full funding. That is one of the biggest advocacy points for CSBA and for SANDAPS, our county, fair and full funding. And until we get to real fair and full funding of education, then we need to be realistic of where we're at. We're getting cut. We got cut. And it makes me aggravated that the first body that takes a hit when we're in fiscal crisis at the state and federal level is education. It's an attack, an assault on our kids, and it just makes me sad. So let's be careful about our word choices. Just realize where realistically we are and the uncertainties as we go forward with the state's budget. And hopefully we'll get federal relief. It will keep the 10% cut at bay for at least another year, hopefully. So that's my huge soapbox today. All right, so that's it.
Thank you, Cindy. Yes, Natalie.
So I will talk about a win. Our mural is amazing. And I'm driving by it every single day to check on the progress. It looks wonderful. I'm very proud of the work, and I kind of sneak over there and yell up to Wes that he's doing a great job. So for those who haven't driven by it, check it out. I wanted to invite the community. Mrs. Murphy had done this online, but on June 29th at 1 o'clock, they're going to be doing the completion of the first mural. And so I think just a little kind of celebration and hooray to recognize that.
A parent reached out and asked if they could clap for the final brush stroke. So I worked with Jim on trying to figure out when that would be, and worked with Wes, and so we're hoping that that's around 1 o'clock on the 29th.
Well, I'll be standing there with them. Another thing I wanted to remind everyone about is what I spoke about in the board meeting, our last board meeting, just because it is very important. Election season is coming up quickly, and we do have board positions that are going to be up for election. Some people are going to run again, and one position in particular is vacant currently because we had to redraw the lines. The current one of our current board members cannot run for that seat. So that area is Lake Gregory, Crestline, VOE, Cedar Pines Park. Thank you.
Actually
not Lake Gregory.
Yeah.
Sorry, Crestline, VOE, Toptown, and Cedar Pines Park. So if anybody who lives in those areas is at all interested in running, has a passion for education and finance and collaborative work, please reach out to us. You need to file with the San Bernardino County Register of Voters between July 13th and August 7th. So again, if you have any questions, please let us know. The other thing that I just wanted to praise everyone here for is really the collaborative process that's taken place since the school closures have occurred. Administrative teams, unions, teachers, everyone has really worked well together as a team and demonstrated their understanding that things that are flexible and need to remain flexible as we move forward with this. we do get multiple emails a day with contradictory information about what recommendations or guidelines we should be following. And, you know, when people use that phrase, a lot of moving parts, I find it an excuse sometimes to not consolidate information and make a plan. But there are a lot of moving parts here. And as soon as you make a plan, you're forced to make a different plan and to adapt and to adjust. And I know that our students are very resilient, and I have seen that parents and grown-ups in this process are trying their best to be as resilient as we see our kids being. So I just appreciate everyone who's really been involved, made this a community and a team effort to try to get our kids educated the best way possible. Like, we all have that mission, and we have different ideas on doing that, but I think we're respecting each other and trying to find the best possible plan. So I'll keep that brief because we are going to be talking about that as a team on the agenda. But the general point was a thank you to everyone involved in our district and in the community who's helped in that process. So that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Dr. Lindman.
Thank you.
Moving on to Jordana Ridlin.
Okay, and I'm gonna try and keep my comments brief as well. A couple mentions earlier from various comments about being data-driven, and one of the things I have really appreciated about the response the district has had so far in planning has been that we've been, as much as we can be, data-driven. Natalie's talking about, in terms of all the moving parts, I kind of liken our position in the district as being the tail end of the whip. So we have no say in a lot of the different things that are happening. And right now, societally, at least in California, looking at the data, the next couple weeks are going to be really telling as far as what's happening with COVID. I'm looking right now at California's report based on, as of yesterday, in terms of caseload and fatality. They report things daily, and I'm a data junkie. Thankfully, going into, as far as going into today, there have been still no fatalities for under 18-year-olds, and I'm very grateful for that. I dread the day that that changes, but as the data seems to indicate, under 18-year-olds are not as prone to getting the illness, and also when they do get ill, it is not hitting them as devastatingly as, say, the 80-plus population, where that's where within the 80-year-olds and older, 45.7% of the fatalities have taken place. At least for, it seems as far as COVID, our kids are pretty safe. What concerns me is, we say better safe than sorry in terms of their physical health. Mental health-wise, it's very possible that keeping isolation for our children may end up having some unforeseen consequences. They may not get ill in some ways, but maybe not as a parent from taking a temperature is the mental consequences in terms of isolation and not being able to have the routines that we've had in the past. So one of the things I'm really pleased with is in the past year, the school district did put in Kelvin, which is a way for us to take little snapshots, the pulses of where students are at using data. Heather Dominguez worked with Kelvin to get that implemented. And I know we've tried through our distance learning to continue to collect data, but that was problematic in terms of just getting information. But I think mental health is going to be one of the big challenges in this next school year there's a lot of challenges, but making sure that our students are well taken care of in whichever form we're educating them. Not, yes, educationally, yes, in terms of safety, in terms of keeping them physically healthy, but there's also mental health that we need to continue to keep tabs on. And the idea, I've heard time and time again over the past several months, that we need to be better safe than sorry. I think what goes along with that sometimes is unforeseen consequences, and we have to be mindful of the choices that we make and where we might have not an immediate reaction that might be negative. Over the long haul, there might be worse consequences if we don't think through what we're doing. So that is kind of the lion's share of what I wanted to say, so thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Dr. Bramson.
Good evening. This evening's agenda has a comprehensive COVID mitigation plan. This plan includes resolutions that our district needs to respond to the pandemic. Our mitigation plan addresses our new normal. Numerous topics, or you can say moving parts, are covered in the plan which support the safety of our students and staff. These include mental health concerns, child abuse prevention, reporting, distance learning, school calendars, English learners, grading, evaluation of academic progress, social distancing, personal protective equipment, hygiene practices, food service, non-discrimination, community relations, and potential for reclosure of our campuses. I want to let you know that having this developed, this mitigation plan, has been in conjunction with the California School Board Association. There has been much work, diligence put into this plan. Rick has taken steps to develop this mitigation plan with foresight and diligence, taking into account possible scenarios. RIM also may adopt additional resources as needed to respond to the COVID pandemic. I am pleased by so much diligence and forethought that has gone into protecting our district and caring for our students and staff. We have the resilience that is needed to overcome the difficulties we are now experiencing regarding this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bramson. And we'll move on to my board report. I wanted to start off with, many of you may have seen, but the board sent out a funding advocacy letter to our California state legislators. That's Assemblymember J.O. Rinaldi and State Senator Mike Morrell. We also sent a letter to our community asking for your help, and I wanted to thank everyone who sent a letter to our legislators asking them to prioritize and protect public education funding. Since then, as Cindy mentioned, the legislature has reached a deal that provides some protections for school districts in the state, but those protections do not solve our financial woes. It's really important to note that, or emphasize, I should say, that California school districts were in financial distress before the pandemic happened. There's 1,000 school districts in the state of California, and almost all of them have a very bleak financial futures, and some of them, estimating that they wouldn't be solvent in 3 to 5 years. That's very common for a lot of districts in the state of California, and that was before the pandemic took place. That was before all the additional costs that are associated with distance learning, that are associated with COVID-19 compliance, and to think that this new deal is at all a win for districts, it's not. It's we were spared the absolute worst case scenario and dealt a bad scenario. But we'll continue advocating as a school board for full and fair funding for our district, and we may ask for your help in the future. And the reason that we would ask for your help is because your part is important. It's one thing for 5 board members, really 5 people, to send a letter to our state elected official. It's another thing to have you as part of the community sending advocacy letters out with us. So we'll probably ask for your help again in the future for something else, and hopefully you'll be there for us, because we're more than just a group of people living in a school district's boundaries. We're really a community, and that's not something that every school district can say. We're very fortunate to be able to say that we are a community up here, and I know that this community bands together when it's important. With that, I wanted to kind of keep it brief. I just wanted to thank everyone for their support and for their help in asking our legislators to spare our districts. But unlike I normally do, please feel comfortable reaching out to your board members. Reach out to us if you have questions about our budget, if you have questions about the, exactly what protections were put in place or how that works, or if you want to learn about how school districts are funded generally speaking, or anything else, you could really reach out to us anytime. All of us, I think, make it a point to be really accessible in our communities. We take a lot of emails and community requests for meetings, and we're always happy to. I know that, I know that, and I know that we'll continue to do that. So with that, we'll move on to 9.2, our superintendent, Michelle Murphy.
All right, good evening. Piggybacking on what Jordan said about the advocacy letters, we appreciate those that sent them. Some things that AXA is working on right now, very strongly in Sacramento, and it have been heard on the floor about, is releasing liabilities to school districts for COVID-19 cases regarding our reopening plans. So that is a really strongly being heard and fought for at the state level. And the other thing that we could address as a community is our request to the CDE to provide us with the Chromebooks that we need to go one-to-one. And so if you're looking for other ways to advocate for us, those would be 2 ways to do so. Tonight you'll be seeing on the agenda a reopening strategic plan. There's lots of work and hours that have gone behind that plan with many parties involved. But there's also things to back it up. So we have PowerPoints already made for the first day of school and what that would look like for students and for teachers in their classrooms. Those are already made. We have employee guidelines and acknowledgement letters from our parents. We have site opening checklists for our administrators. We've ordered stickers and posters and banners in anticipation of being allowed to reopen. And what banners we'll talk about too are passive wellness checks, and you'll get that strategic plan in emails tomorrow with any announcements that were made here this evening. So I just wanted to thank mostly Todd Beal and I sat and did a lot of those things together, so thank you for your support and for that of Cabinet to get those things done. I attended a meeting today called the Watershed Moment by San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools, and it was a panel with insights for policing, protesting, and a perspective that impacts our school about the protests and things that are happening right now. So it was very interesting. We had superintendents on the panel and police chiefs and how those things impact our schools. So it was an interesting conversation to hear. I'd like to congratulate our retirees. We didn't have the opportunity to have them at a board meeting because of the restrictions. We still have ordered a gift for you, and we'll be, I guess, mailing them. So I wish that I could see you in person, but thank you for all you've done to serve RIM and serve our community, either in the classroom or supporting the classroom. So I'd like to congratulate our retirees. And again, I would like to wish everyone a good summer break. So I will be taking the next 2 weeks off along with Cabinet and returning July 13th. So just be safe, and we will continue to provide you updates in July if things change from any announcements that we make this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll move on to 10.0, our action calendar. 10.1, Superintendent Approval of the 2020-2021 School Year Strategic Plan in response to reopening guidelines and post-COVID-19 Spring 2020 closure. Financial impact, none. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Natalie's our first.
Second.
Cindy's our second.
Beat you to it, Jen.
And with that, we'll go ahead and open up discussion. Who wants to kick that off?
I always, no, go ahead.
You took your mask off, Natalie. Are you?
I think we all have a lot to say about this, and I'll begin with saying thank you again for creating the strategic plan and coming up with it for us. There are a lot of moving parts and so many things to take into consideration when you're trying to determine what's in the best interest of students, our community, our employees, and I know myself, it's a very challenging and difficult decision to help be part of. And I know many people, you're just never going to please everyone, and there are so many varying opinions, and from doctors to politicians, there are people on both sides of the issue of what is best to do in this time. And there, in regards to having one right answer, or to look at scientific data, there's different scientific data out there, and people who are doing research are presenting different stuff. And again, politicians on different ends. We get emails constantly about what are the best practices, what other school districts are doing, what parents want, what teachers want. And I personally believe that providing options, as many options as possible, is the best thing to do. So families can take it, make that decision themselves. Everybody has something different to consider when they're choosing to send their children back to school or not. And I feel like they should have the most freedom in their ability to do that. So that is really what's important to me when I'm looking at the strategic plan and deciding to approve it or not approve it, or vote for it or not approve it, is that options are available, that safety is a priority, and I know both of those things have been taken into consideration. Those are the top considerations in creating this. Some are just start off thoughts that I have. I am particularly concerned for teachers that are who are older and more vulnerable to COVID, and I think it's marvelous that students are not being as affected, but that doesn't mean that they won't be potentially taking it home to family members, or that teachers won't be exposed. So I'm definitely sensitive to that, where I feel like, again, options, as many as that we're able to provide, is best, so then families on their own can determine what's best for them. Was Leslie trying to chime in?
Leslie's raised her hand, yes.
Go ahead, Leslie.
I would like very much to have it known that our strategic plan will be on our school board website
Yes,
for our stakeholders to find.
they will be emailed it tomorrow. Every
And,
parent, every parent will be emailed it tomorrow, along with a press release with the strategic plan.
It's approving her recommendation is what we're doing.
That's wonderful.
Or not approving
Get
her
equal
recommendation.
information to everyone.
Yes.
Should we just tell?
Employees will also get a separate email from me as well.
For those that weren't listening to your presentation of the strategic plan last week, would you mind just chiming in as briefly as possible of what your recommendation is and what we would be approving, Mrs. Murphy?
Okay, so the strategic plan starts out with a brief history on what transpired in the spring, and then on the front page it does talk about my recommendation would be that we do open with 100% coming back to school, with an option for families that would choose not to do that for home choice. Home choice is a K-6 program that has been in the works for several years and that is finally coming to fruition. It wasn't forcing the issue because of COVID-19. It was going to happen anyways in August as a way to capture kids and give elementary students a choice. And independent study would be an option for 7-12 if they did not want to come back to school for family reasons. It then goes on, the document then goes on to explain all that we've done to get ready for students to come back, including looking at the number of desks and having desks facing forward, and hand sanitizer in every classroom and in every common area. Those have already been ordered. Masks for every student, and employees will have options for face shields and masks. They're already here or being delivered. So we've just taken a lot into account. One of the places we know that we can't do any physical distancing at all would be on our buses. And so bus would be a place where masks would be required. Classrooms and hallways would be optional if the regulations change, because since this plan was written, they announced that masks are to be worn in public. There's much debate right now whether schools are a public place that they're going to enforce that. As they have mentioned, that there's been contradictory statements, so we have been getting advice from different entities, and there is conflicting information about what that impact to schools are at this time. So I don't have a specific answer for masks particularly, other than what we have in the plan of recommended them during passing period, mandatory on the buses and optional in the classroom. We have looked at our cleaning routines and the solutions that we use. We have provided our custodians with training. We have looked at technology and how can we do that, should we have to go into distance learning. Our teachers attended training in May for Google Classroom, in case we have to do that. And we are really just looking at wellness checks and making them passive, and so all of that is outlined in the plan. I know I spoke very fast and I didn't get to a lot of the bullet points, but there's been a lot done to prepare and to get supplies ahead of time. We did our orders early because we didn't want to be putting orders in July along with every school district in the nation trying to fight for the same supplies. So, and then the strategic plan goes on to continue. What would a hybrid model look like, though that was the least popular option from staff and from parents? And then what would a full-on distance learning model look like, should we not be allowed to open school?
I just wanted to highlight again that if we are to move forward with approving this strategic plan, just highlighting that it is dependent upon what guidelines are in place today, and that it still can fluctuate and change over time. But I think it was important for the district to create a plan and to say, best case scenario as of right now, this is what we hope to see when school starts, so people can start planning for next year and what that might look like for their families.
We definitely cannot guarantee that if, even with the board passing my recommendations that are in the strategic plan, that would be what would happen. Some of the strategic plan already needs updated based on AB 77. So there are a couple things that would need to change. And so just small things. There were a couple things that I may have not addressed as fully as I needed to, that I already have in my notes to do. This is the second draft of this document, so we anticipate another draft before the start of school based on anything that happens in the next few weeks.
I just want to say too, I appreciate you being proactive in the safety and health measures of ordering those face shields and ordering the hand sanitizers, because you're right, we're going to be competing in the same marketplace. And another thing on my soapbox that bugs me is that the state is not helping us with ongoing reopening costs. Yes, we might have one-time federal relief monies to help us with what we already did, which is the food distribution that increased our cost for food. But the reopening costs and the ongoing costs there's nothing in the budget, and we're doing it, so technically we're getting hit yet again. Our budget is getting hit yet again, and it's very frustrating. So I appreciate that we've already taken these steps to put some of this already ordered and already in place, and we've been thinking about it, and we got to jump on other school districts, because I know that our plan was outlined before other districts down the hill, so I really appreciate that. I think I'm going to talk about something that Jordana brought up in her board comments, which is the socialization for mental health. I think that speaking for one of my daughters, I know that school really helped in terms of her mental health, of having her friends, having the extracurriculars. Really that socialization really helped during those really rocky years of teenagerdom. And I think, and then kids, when they go to preschool and to go to kindergarten, that making friends and that joy of learning together, I mean, that is so important. that mental health component of socialization to, I know that my kids would not have done well with distance learning, 100% distance learning. There's no way. Kira would have killed me and I would have killed her because, you know, she needed sports. She needed to play soccer and needed to play track because for her, having ADHD, it was a way to decompress, to be able to even sit down and do her homework. And so all those components are so important, and I know that there is risk with going back to school, but you, like Jordana said, you have to take into account the whole child, and what we're gonna be doing is literally getting data almost on a daily basis from the county health department and the state on the rapid moving parts. I'm gonna use that term because it's true. And we will be able, with this plan, to be able to flip a switch if we have to, but I think that we should look at data and what it tells us today, make the decision based on data today, and be ready if the data changes, which this plan will give us. But I think it's really important for our kids to have one-to-one face contact with their teacher. I mean, again, I'm gonna so pick on Kara right now, but I mean, the 1 million questions she would ask Mr. Williams in AP biology, that was needed, that contact, that affirmation. Our kids need that. They need that physical interaction because you're right there in their space. Technology is great, but a Zoom meeting does not replace that one-on-one personal contact, that feeling that emanates from your kindergarten teacher that you're, oh, look at you, you touched your shoe. No, it just, that stuff is missing, that personal contact, and I believe that personal contact is so important in our education, in the extracurriculars, in the sports. All of that is needed.
The guidelines that were released this week, AB 77, I believe it was 315 pages of lovely reading material, but they have really put some stricter guidelines on districts that are choosing to only come back with distance learning. And some of those guidelines would be things like that teachers have to assess the average amount of time that every assignment that they assigned would take. So in order to meet the instructional minutes requirements in Ed Code. So that kind of task alone placed on our staff and guesswork and differentiating from classroom to classroom. I mean, those guidelines are not addressed in here because they were just released 2 days ago. So it's those kind of things that are looking like making distance learning more and more difficult.
And it's not, and some of the recommendations and guidelines are so, I mean, they're unrealistic.
Yeah.
They really are. We can try to do our best in meeting those guidelines and recommendations and keep abreast of every single change that comes down the pike. We definitely are gonna, but the distance learning, I mean, the social distancing on a bus.
And
You
just
have the
looking
option
at,
if
right. And
looking at wearing this in here, I think this is a 4 to 5 hour meeting, and this is difficult. I can't imagine being in a classroom and being a teacher or a student that would have to wear this the entire time.
But they have the option to do it.
But they do,
If
yes.
the parents are insistent on mask protection,
We'll be providing them.
exactly, and then
For
the hand
students and staff.
sanitizers and
Yes.
just trying to do the traffic patterns to minimize the issues of contact. And I mean, we are within the physical facility, we're going to try our best to meet everything, all those recommendations and guidelines. But I
And thank you, I didn't say that. We've established traffic patterns
Yeah,
and
it
stickers for the
just-
floors.
It
and-
just is the fact that I think right now the data says go to school with common sense and keep looking at the data to make adjustments. But the kids, I know my kids would have needed it.
What I appreciate is with the plan to
my kids have two, and they're both very different, is, it does provide options. It takes into
Exactly.
consideration that there might be families that,
Are very scared to send
are,
kids.
yeah, for various reasons, and, various valid reasons, may be very concerned about having their kids on campus. I know, when I was a new teacher, I got sick so much this year. It's just one of the things that's known about when you're first year of teaching, you're exposed to a lot of different things, and so that's a real fear.
It
And
is.
it's valid, and so, I like that, one, there's flexibility in this plan. Two is, and Mr. Bear just left, but he had brought up earlier, is that it's important for everybody to realize that this is, where's the plan? This plan is going to be a living document at this point, with all the moving parts, and also the more we learn and the more we collaborate, this is going to be something that will be continued to be modified, because we want to be able to provide the best plan possible. And I think Michelle at this point has put together, and her team have put together an excellent plan with the information that we have available, with the guidelines that we currently have, and with the data that we currently have. So, I'm a huge supporter of this plan, but I think that it's important for our community and our staff, and our families to maintain that flexibility and understand that nothing is set in stone at this point, and options are available.
And we're prepared should things change, and to give that support.
Right, and I was gonna say that we've talked extensively about the fact that if we were to be forced by outside forces to go to full-time distance learning again, that distance learning would look very different than it did for us when COVID-19 first hit us.
Because that was supplemental, it was not graded material, it was supplemental. And so that needs to be differentiated, because I think a lot of parents are under the impression that that's what distance learning will look like in the
Right.
future, and
Yeah.
it's not. It's gonna be graded, it's going to be
Teachers and
normalized.
students are all going to be accountable
Yes.
in different ways, that were
Attendance,
not there
instruction.
prior.
Everything is going to be different, and we're planning for that. We're planning for monitoring to be put in place to make sure these things are happening, so that we don't have what they're calling a learning gap. And that's what we're trying so hard to minimize, is any kind of learning gap if we have to go to 100% distance learning or even a blended learning model. We just are very cognizant of it, and it's being discussed at length,
Everywhere.
everywhere.
I think,
Meetings all day long.
one
Yeah.
thing that we also need to touch on with the strategic plan is, I like so much that it includes how our district will approach special education in that learning environment. I like that it includes provisions, even if we transition to a 100% distance learning model, there might be a provision that might require or be better to have our special education students on campus every day. So I think it's important that we include those types of provisions to ensure that we're meeting IEPs, to ensure that we're doing our best for those underrepresented students, in addition to our English language learners. This plan also addresses how we will keep up with those things, because we know that that's important. It's something that the state will, give us essentially a grade on with the dashboard. But I think my only point of contention would be that until we know or get further clarification from the state, I think this plan needs to operate under the assumption that masks will be required at the state level. We don't know if we don't know if school districts will be exempted from that requirement or not. And this strategic plan currently offers, currently says that it's optional for students and staff in most situations. I just think it's important to understand, and as we move forward through this plan, we should go forward assuming that it's going to be required, because that's going to require more work, that's going to require more from our district.
And more money.
It's also going to require more money, and additionally, as Michelle had mentioned, it's not clear the liability that school districts take on in a new COVID world or a post-pandemic world. And I think it's important for us to take that into consideration as a district and operate under the assumption that it will be required. One, because of the state mandate, and two, for liability purposes. So that would be my only thing in regards to this in regards to this strategic plan that I would say might need adjustment. The second draft was created before that state guideline was released last week, but I think with that in mind, it might be something good for us to possibly adjust.
And I think that parents really, even if you don't wanna watch the news or read a newspaper or go on the internet, I think just being aware of what is the current state mandate, then you're not shocked if your child is required to wear a mask at school. Then you're more prepared if you are keeping on top of what is the latest, cause it is moving and changing every week based on data. So I would say just keep educating yourself on what's going on, because then you're not gonna be completely shocked if you do walk on campus and we're handing your kid a mask.
And the letter that will accompany the strategic plan says that an update, and any communication on these requirements will come out, after July 20th. So that gives us, still over 20 days to see about the mask requirements and to see, which agency interprets that executive order properly, and so that we will update them, in plenty of time before school starts to have that update. So, and my letter does state that will accompany the strategic plan.
We'll have to follow the state mandate regardless, if there is a
Yes.
mask ordinance, I understand that. I just would have concerns if it's optional in terms of, how challenging that would be at the school sites and for teachers to be able to, the distraction that they would be with some students and, the difficulty and the liability of stating that we are keeping masks on kids at all times and the reality of actually
Little
doing
squirrely
it.
bodies.
Taking them off.
Little squirrely bodies.
Your kid's gonna take them off if you send them to school and
Yes.
they're under a
it's
certain
right.
age.
This
Or
is
even
kindergarten.
Exactly,
And I
yes.
think that comes back to that reasonable, practical, and feasible. Is it reasonable that a teacher would spend all of their time policing masks versus instruction? And it's not reasonable. Practical or feasible.
Yeah, just,
It's none of
I
that.
think that's important as well to note that, for example, we talked about the busings, the easiest example of where it's just not reasonable, practical, or feasible to have social distancing on a bus. And I think we need to operate or move forward. And it's very clear in the strategic plan that, some of the state guidelines that they put out, although they're not required, some of them aren't reasonable, practical, or feasible, and we just have to live in that reality. We wanna limit the potential exposure to all of our students and staff. We want to protect them, but you have to account for what the reality of the situation is, and a lot of it doesn't account for the possibility of social distancing. If we could have social distancing in a classroom, I'm sure we would, but it's just not in any way reasonable, practical, or feasible, unless we start building new schools and magically
We're
have
gonna
them
have
built.
every class in the PAC. That's just
Right.
how it's gonna be.
So, I like that.
Thank God it has.
In the
Right?
gym.
I like that we
That's
include
the
provisions that we will follow state guidelines and recommendations as best as possible. But, again, I would ask, maybe if we could include one little provision or add something to the strategic plan, just a little one-liner that says, under the current assumptions, we should operate as if masks will be required. I think that would be the only thing that I would ask the board to consider, amending before we adopt this. Because it's important that if we put out, currently the strategic plan is, this is what the community would like to see. This is what the collaboration between administration and the union leaders has produced. But it doesn't reflect the reality that we should probably operate under the assumption that they'll be required. So I think that's something we already know today. I would just encourage that to be considered too.
I don't know, I think that if you leave it broad enough that we're following state and county,
Guidelines,
The
that's
guidelines,
sufficient.
and-
What if they come up with a different one?
but I think that leaving it
7
that broad,
weeks away.
yeah,
It is 7 weeks away, but I think but we're approving it today, and under today, that's the current assumption. So I think that's where what I would bring to the board's attention is, yes, we can adopt something knowing it's going to change, but as of today, something's already changed and we know it. Why not include it in the strategic plan?
Well, I think, but if I heard correctly, Michelle said several things changed because of what came out 2 days ago.
Right,
So if she's gonna rework it, why not rework all of it, which is it's not a realistic expectation for tonight for that to happen, is my take on it. So, would we be reapproving the next version of the strategic plan, or do we put that in your hands to submit?
So the board's approval of the strategic plan is currently not required. I did that as one, a courtesy, and one for having this discussion.
And-
So, it could have been just based on my report last week. I've covered what I need to cover for my recommendation and that you've heard it. So, putting it on here as an action item was, allowing you to discuss my report from
So-
June 11th.
Yeah.
And, so those drafts and things, when
Didn't
COVID first
change.
happened and we had an emergency board meeting, you had voted to give me power to make decisions. And so that power would still be in place for me to make decisions based on any changes or things that we may need to do. I just think
I
that
think that us making a decision on the basic premise, which is we're going to school.
100%.
I think
that's
that-
the bigger part.
That's the bigger picture on this whole thing, and if we are wanting to make the changes tonight based on what came out 2 days ago and AB 77 and everything like that, then we're getting way too bogged down because it's going to be a fluid, I like that word, a fluid document. So I think we need to focus on the bigger picture, which is a parent wants to know, is my kid going to school, or is my kid going distance learning, or is it a hybrid? And I think we keep
if they have
that
to wear a
biggest.
mask, they're going to pull them.
And
And
I-
40% of the
well,
parents.
hopefully they wouldn't pull them, hopefully they'd leverage our home choice program or the
But
independent study.
I think that we just keep it broad because we don't know what's gonna go on, and I think we keep it broad to allow the best flexibility for the district to kind of almost, we're flying by the seat of our pants because it changes so often that we're gonna have to be that kind of flexible. So I think we just keep the language that we're gonna follow state and county mandates and guidelines and recommendations, and we vote so that we keep our eye on the big umbrella picture, which is how is my kid going to school?
So, and the week of July 20th is really halfway between now and school opening, so that we would get a time to update for what we have learned this week and what we're going to learn in the next 3.
And between July 20th and school opening,
It may
it's
change
gonna
again.
change again. It's going to. That's how fast these things are moving. So I anticipate
We're gonna get
Friday before school starts, a new
Another-
letter, a new update, and maybe modified strategic plan that says, hey, these are your reminders for your kid when you come to school next week.
Yeah, I think we let it be that way because it's going to change. And let's just get this thing approved so that our parent knows what's going on. And we don't
Or
have to
not
get
approved,
propped,
depending
or
on
not
the-
approved, whatever we wanna do, but then we could, and leave the language broad.
And I think just there is a one-liner in the strategic plan that says, based on feedback from all stakeholders, it is the desire of the district to open with 100% plan for our students and the option for K-6 homeschool or 7 independent study, 7-12 independent study. So when we approve this, just to be clear, because it does outline 100%,
Right.
50%, and 0%.
Right.
If approved, this would be us as a board saying we desire the 100% option.
Right, with options for parents if they so pursue the whole choice.
I
for
just wanna
independent
get that
study.
clarity because if this document does include the 50% guidelines, so if we
If
approve
we
it
need it.
today,
Right,
it's just,
acknowledging we might have to go that route
Yeah.
if the state mandates that.
That we're prepared to go any route that they may
Or
mandate.
100%
Very-
distance learning if that's what, because we do hard closure, yeah.
I just,
Yeah, but preferred route, if feasible, would be 100%.
Right.
I just don't want any community members to open this document and say, well, is it
I was-
100%, 50%, or 0?
Yeah,
I want it clear that the board has decided, if we decide to, if we approve this, then the board would be saying, yes, we as a district would want to open 100%. I don't want there to be ambiguity or confusion about it, because we've already presented, over the past couple of board meetings or so, the options of 100%, 50%, 0% model. So this is us saying, picking one of them.
And the letter that goes with it clearly states that.
Okay, very good. Well, I feel like I've been heard. I said my piece, and I feel like you've all heard me, and that it makes sense that this is completely fluid and dynamic. And it is included in the document that we will follow state and county guidelines as best as possible. Leslie, do you have anything to add?
Yes, but I don't wanna start another tirade.
We'll take all the
There
time we
are-
need for this.
There are policies and procedures on how to put a mask on and put a mask off in order to protect the wearer. And, one of the ways to do that, children won't do.
There you go.
Another one is that I've seen people, numerous people, walking around with their masks below their noses, which doesn't protect the wearer or the people that are around them. So I can't say that masks will be a great benefit probably to the students as much as they will be to the teachers, because the teachers and staff will know how to take and put on a mask and take off a mask without opening themselves up to risk of infection. Another thing is that I don't believe data has been collected on a syndrome that is similar to the Kawasaki syndrome, which is a young COVID patient's set of symptoms. I don't believe any data has been collected on that. And there are ways to collect data and there are ways to read data. And I have been following a couple items, especially from the different school districts. And not that anything was nefarious, but it was just the way it was perceived and the way it was collected, and possibly some of it's for monitoring purposes. There's more to data than meets the eye, and so we have to be cognizant of the possibilities that there is more than one way to look at the data.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you, Leslie. You're
And
not,
just so the board knows, that first day PowerPoint that I talked about, that I gave to all of our administrators to work on for their own schools because of grade levels that would have to be, tailored to meet their needs, does include hygiene, Leslie. So it talks about how to properly wash your hands, because that is part of the COVID guidelines, that we teach those things the first week of school. So all of that's been prepared and reminded of what they have to teach, their hallway traffic patterns, what does social distancing mean. So it's vocabulary that they should be hearing, but we're going to have to teach it. So all of that is in the first day PowerPoint that they'll be seeing in their classrooms.
I apologize that I'm going a little left. In regards to back to school nights, we are planning on doing those still the day before school starts. Is that?
They are on the calendar for that,
Okay.
though the crowd guidelines have not been lifted, so
So we may change.
they may change. And so we hadn't made an announcement, and that is not in the
It's not in
strategic
there,
plan
okay.
about back to school nights, because we're waiting for crowd restrictions. So it might have to look staggered, or, it just depends on, like right now, is it still 10? I believe it's still 10, right? Is it 50?
for the
I-
gathering
It's
one?
gonna go
Yeah.
back to 0 in a second.
So,
We're gonna have to.
They're on the calendar, I will say that.
Thank you.
For the
Sorry,
elementary.
that was a little off.
Wait,
No.
are the high school?
Everyone's supposed to be.
Oh, Lord.
Can we vote?
Any other discussion? I was just gonna say, I think again, just, you know, I do think that there should be that little provision added to the current document, but irrespective of that, on the whole, I agree with the document. But I do think we should have added that little line.
I think we should keep it broad, but thank you, Jordan.
Of course.
We can always push for that during the summer.
I think on the whole, though, the plan is very well thought out. I really appreciate that it's really involved community feedback, you know, including parents. It's included staff feedback. It's included union input and negotiation with their union leadership. It's included site administration and district administration. Board members have had the opportunity to provide input. So I think that this is not a plan developed at all in isolation. It's been a really large effort since the closure happened in mid-March. With that, let's go ahead and vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 10.2, Superintendent, approval to add board policy BP 0470, COVID-19 mitigation plan per the recommendation of the California School Board Association, CSBA, fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Ooh.
I'm gonna second it.
Let's give that one to Cindy since
That
Natalie.
was loud.
Yeah, and then we'll give the second to Dana. Discussion.
Thank God we pay our CSBA fee. That's all I have to say.
The value that they provide for
Oh my
these
God.
board policies, ensuring that we comply with Ed Code and any other state laws and federal laws
And then
is
Todd,
immensely.
Todd, are you excited that we have paid our membership fee so that they can write all this crap?
They keep me busy.
I love that they send us emails 19 times a day.
Yeah.
In lieu of a CSBA membership would be a very costly lawyer.
Yes.
So
And Todd.
the membership is well worth it.
And Jim.
Any other discussion?
Just wanted to make sure, this is like an all or nothing sort of a thing. We take the recommendation in terms of that because, you know, is there any possible concerns of us having any kind of liability for being a smaller district and not being able to have as much tracking as other larger districts might have with this policy?
No, I mean, what's in there, what's helped us a lot is, you'll see it in there, to the extent possible. So it allows us some flexibility in what we can and can't do. And we had a lot of discussion related to that, so it does provide some protection for litigation wise. And if it add a little caveat in there too, is the way this is put together, it's only during the time COVID is basically going on within our nation or in our state. We may come to a time when this isn't an issue, such as H1N1 that happened over years ago, that kind of waned down and things got to normal. So we may be coming down the road in maybe a year or so, who knows, coming back to repeal this, because it's specifically just for COVID-19.
Thank you.
That's good to keep in mind. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll call for that vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
And we got a ding.
Motion carries unanimously. 10.3, Superintendent, approval of one candidate for the 2020 California School Boards Association, CSBA, Delegate Assembly runoff ballot for Sub-Region 16B. This is due to a tie vote that resulted in a runoff election in our region, fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Natalie's our first,
I'll second.
Dan is our second.
I'd like
The nominees are Henry Cowles, Cucamonga School District, or Barbara Flores, San Bernardino City Unified School District. The board nominated Barbara Flores as one of the 6 candidates at the February 16, 2020 board meeting.
I would like to nominate Barbara Flores.
I second.
Okay, any discussion on that motion? I would agree overall. I think, I remember that board meeting happening at NPH, and we talked about it a little bit there. I would agree. Anything else? Okay, calling for the vote on Barbara Flores as our choice then. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Oh, okay. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Good luck to you, Barbara. 10.4, Superintendent, approval to adopt resolution number 19/20-21, order of election and specifications of the election order of Rim of the World Unified School District Governing Board members whose terms expire December 11, 2020, fiscal impact to be determined, cost will be prorated among the school districts and other agencies, consolidating with the election/unrestricted general fund election and county fees.
So
We have a
moved.
motion. Cindy's our first,
I'll second.
Dan is our second. Discussion. I think this is just again, normal
Normal business.
business. Whenever there's going to be one of our seats up for election, we have to obviously approve in a resolution that approves of that election and the specifications surrounding it. Not really much of a choice in terms of doing so, but it's important to do nonetheless. It's important for everybody to be able to run for any seat. Any other discussion? Calling for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 10.5, Personnel Services, approval of the personnel paid, fiscal impact budgeted.
I make a motion to approve the personnel page as revised.
Second?
So we have Cindy's our first. Again, that personnel page was revised at the beginning of our, when we adopted the agenda. Natalie's our second there. Discussion? Calling for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Leslie, are you abstaining?
No, I said aye.
Okay, so we have her down as an aye then, and no one's opposed, so the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to 10.6, Personnel Services, approval of resolution number 19/20-20, reduction or elimination of classified positions, striking the CNS secretary position from the layoff list. Fiscal impact, approximately $197,627, unrestricted general fund personnel.
Well, that will change due to the striking of that position, so.
Absolutely.
It'll change, so.
So the fiscal impact
TBD.
really should be to be determined.
Yes.
I would agree.
I will make that motion, so moved.
Second.
Cindy's our first, Natalie's our second. I think discussion, it's important to note that, yes, a fiscal impact has been changed because we are voting on a revised motion here. Again, striking the CNS position from the layoff list.
Can you say that in the pro way, as to not be confusing? This is no longer on the reduction list.
Correct, yes. That is correct. So a yes vote would approve the resolution with the exception of that CNS secretary position.
Thank
So
you.
voting yes would mean that position would be,
Remain.
would remain. Yeah, that's the best way to put it, using that. You want to use that double negative language.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Danny, you look like you're thinking a little bit. Oh,
No.
okay. All right. All right, we'll call for the vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously, and again, that's a revised motion. Moving on to 10.7, Personnel Services, approval of the classified management and certificated management salary schedule provisions effective 7/1/20. Fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first,
Second.
Natalie's our second. Discussion. Seeing none, we'll call for that vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 10.8, Personnel Services, approval to extend the superintendent's contract of employment from June 30th, 2022 to June 30th, 2024. Fiscal impact, none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first,
Second?
Natalie's our second.
Or Leslie?
Pursuant to Government Code Section 54953, Subdivision C3, the board provides this oral summary of the recommended 2-year extension of to the superintendent's contract of employment. The term of the amended employment contract between Rim of the World Unified School District and Superintendent Michelle Murphy shall be from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2024. The change in the annual salary is due to the 1.5% management salary schedule change that was approved at the June 11th, 2020 board meeting for her contract. There are no other elements of compensation, and we are open for discussion.
I want to just say that the governance team, and that includes this particular board and the district office staff, Jim and Heather, we're part of the district office staff, even though Jim doesn't put his mask above his nose, but that we're just so appreciative that we have stability, we've had consistency, we have steadfastness, we've had calm and steady, diligent, knowledgeable guidance through the COVID-19 and school closure. And we're just so looking forward to continuing to work with you as our superintendent. I think that you've really given us what we needed, and I really love the fact that you do have heart for all. You tear up so much, especially when it comes to our kids and our employees, and that it's also reflected in the comments that we receive from community members that that we're lucky to have you. That is what we consistently hear from our community members and our community organizations. And so with your leadership, we just are so glad and so happy that you're continuing to want to stay with us and lead us, and you have such great plans and visions and the ability to lead us that way. You know, it's really hard to get all of us on the same page, and it's not always fast and quick and easy, but you're getting us there, and it's greatly appreciated. And Mark, I forgot, you're part of district office too. Sorry.
Maskless.
Hey. Jim! Got it up there, very good.
I think, Cindy, you hit it right on the head. And I think what's so important for our district and as a community moving forward is ensuring and somewhat guaranteeing that we'll have consistent leadership through at least 2024. I know that that's been a long time complaint that I've heard from constituents and community members that, hey, district leadership, as Mark Barrett suggested, some people may have used it as a stepping stone to advance their own careers. I think it's so wonderful that Michelle has said, before numerous times that she intends to be here through retirement.
Yeah. And beyond.
If we let her retire.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's really important to ensure that there's consistent leadership in this district. Even, there's there will be 3 open seats on the board moving forward. It's important for us to acknowledge that boards could change, and they do, with every election. But the consistency of leadership is what's so important for school districts and any organization, really. So I think I would definitely commend Michelle for that. In regards to the 1.5% raise, I think it's also important to note that since Michelle started here at this school district, she has never taken a pay raise since she's been here. And additionally, if you compare between districts, she is one of the lowest paid. She is the lowest paid.
She is the lowest paid.
Superintendent in all of the surrounding school districts. So that's also important to note. I just want to.
And districts our size and smaller.
Absolutely.
She's
So I
the
think
lowest paid.
I think it's important to just address all of that head on there. It's important to note that yes, compensation for superintendents is not the same universally. So but we see your dedication, Michelle, and we see that, that you want to stay at the district, and that's wonderful.
My colleagues have said it, pretty much all of it already, and we've in closed session done your review, so you know how much we really do, you know, from our hearts appreciate you too, and appreciate I had said, just the calmness in your leadership during this time, and it is a time that could definitely, a leader could create more kind of chaos and havoc, and you did not do that, and I think that showing that really helped the rest of the team approach this in a manner that was as, yeah, absolutely, you know, is as sane as possible in these really crazy times. I enjoyed personally working with you. I love the communication that we have. I am never caught off guard by things. I know from you ahead of time before anything is brought up to me from other sources. So I really value that, and just for me it builds a level of trust, and I think it builds a level of trust amongst the entire team, and hopefully that's trickling down the longer that you stay, and I hope you'll stay again to your retirement and beyond. So the rest of our community can feel that, and since you have been here, it's starting, and we feel it, and I again hope that bleeds down to all of our team members at the school sites too. Thank you, Michelle.
Ooh, here. To add to that, I agree with everything that's been said already, but to add, I think we're so incredibly fortunate to have you here. I really appreciate the team that you've formed. I think our on-site administration is strong, and it's because of your leadership. I think that our community is, through all these scary things that have been happening over the past, I guess, 4 or 6 months, I guess, several months, the community knows that there's somebody at the helm, and there's a lot of trust that's already been conveyed. So this is a scary situation, but your leadership has made it less scary, and I think that there's a certain level of trust and calm in waiting to see what's going to happen. And I think, again, that's a testament to how you have handled things. The one thing I also wanted to add is the leadership that you've shown also among other superintendents. So yes, your pay is not commensurate with the level of leadership that you've taken, not strictly on the mountain, but also in desert and high mountain, in terms of having basically this team of superintendents that you have created, and a support network that extends beyond our mountain. And that's from the relationships that you've developed that we've all benefited from. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know what? The state, I'm sorry, that we have always wanted to have a superintendent that really put RIM out there and really made it where there were networks that extended beyond our mountain community. And you're at the county level, you're the mountain high desert superintendent, and then the state. And for Ted Alejandro to keep tapping you and saying, Michelle, could you be on this committee at the state? Could you be on this committee for me? For our county superintendent to rely so heavily on you, and you're from Rim of the World, is just amazing. Instead of tapping a larger school district like Fontana, it's Rim of the World. And so that has really benefited us, because all that comes back to us. And instead of us always, we're the tail, you're the head. You're just there. So it's just been so brilliant that, Jordana, thank you for pointing that out, because that's huge. That has not been happening for us.
Thank you.
Leslie, do you want to say anything there in the box?
Ditto, ditto, ditto.
Awesome.
I have been very appreciative, and I want to reiterate what Cindy just said and what the rest of the group just said, that having Rim of the World being represented by you on the back side of the mountain, on the front side of the mountain, and across the state has, and will continue to benefit all of us. Thank you.
And Montana's closed its borders forever, so
Yeah.
that's why we're
Go
good.
there.
Sorry.
I have 7 more years. Celebrating 31 years in education July 1st. So, thank you all for the opportunity to serve. I won't say much more because you know I'll read that.
That's what we love about you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call for the vote on this then. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 10.9, Personnel Services, approval to extend the Associate Superintendent Personnel Pupil Services contract of employment from June 30th, 2022 to June 30th, 2024. Fiscal impact, none.
So moved.
Second.
Cindy's our first, Natalie's our second. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54953, Subdivision C3, the board provides this oral summary of the recommended 2-year extension to the Associate Superintendent Personnel Pupil Services Contract of Employment. The term of the amended employment contract between Rim of the World Unified School District and Associate Superintendent Personnel Pupil Services, Todd Beal, shall be from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2024. The change in the annual salary is due to the 1.5% management salary schedule change that was approved at the June 11th, 2024 meeting. Per his contract, there are no other elements of compensation. And I'll open it up to discussion now.
I'm gonna just jump. Todd, you have saved us money. I'm just saying that right now. You don't your knowledge has allowed you to do your job without constantly talking to the lawyers. But you know when to bring the lawyers in. And that is not a popular position. And I have to give you props for doing such a hard position and trying to seek as many win-wins in situations that are really hard, and to be fair and to try to solve problems creatively. And I don't know how you're at Bevmo every weekend, but I'm just saying is that thank you so much for your steadiness and your influence and your ability to because the information you bring to us in closed session, we definitely trust. Like I said, you're not a popular position due to the nature of the position, and my hat's off to you that you're willing to do it. So thank you for staying with us.
It is absolutely a tough position and a tough job to take on. But what I so appreciate about Todd is that no matter how tough anything is, no matter what the concerns or questions are, I know that I can just go straight to Todd and say, this is a concern, this is what I've heard, what's going on?
Exactly.
And I know that he'll respond thoughtfully, carefully, and if he's unsure about something, which is rarely ever, he'll have an answer very soon. Oftentimes he can just rattle off ed code and know the answer right off the bat, but in those rare instances where, ed code might be tricky here, he can review it, decipher it, and come back with clarity on the position. I know it's extremely difficult to read through. We read through those board policies every month, or every time we have a board meeting pretty much, and it's amazing to me that a lot of that is part of Todd's daily life. So thank you for that, and thank you for being that expert we can rely on.
Yeah, what I would like to say is whether I like to hear it or not, you have the right answer. You have the accurate answer. And again, you're always, you usually always know and have already spent time thinking about or becoming informed of a question I have before I ask it. So I really appreciate that. And your relationship with Michelle. I mean, the trust that you guys have with each other, your ability to work so well together is what creates such a great leadership from the top and a strong team. So that is just, I never, have to, it's just nice to not have to worry about that you guys are not on the same page, because you do work it out together, you talk about it, and you come to us as a unified front always too. It's like our parents having a really healthy relationship and then coming back to us with the information that we
Our
need to
spouses
make.
will like to
Our
hear this.
Maybe you have better relationships than the old ones, I don't know. But I recognize that, as a therapist, I do look at relationships, and if they aren't healthy, then the product that they put out isn't gonna be healthy, and you guys have really locked in at this point, and I think that's because you spend the time to foster it, communicate with each other, and develop that trust. So thank you, Todd, for being in a position that nobody wants to be in or likes to be in, and thank you for telling us no and the bad news that we have to hear. I appreciate it.
Leslie's next.
Yes, Leslie.
But it's not easy, coming after all that, all those accolades, but they're all accurate, they're all, right on. You have come across, level-headed, and they're different personality types, and whatever your personality type is exceptional in the position that you're holding. So much confidentiality runs through your office, and I have never heard of a breach in your confidentiality. That I admire. I admire your relationship with Michelle to lead the district in such a trustworthy manner. You are incredibly knowledgeable.
Yes.
To keep abreast of all that's happening and know at the top of, that was the last, no, that was 2 agendas ago. But you're right on top of everything and so approachable, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
You want anything?
Yes, I did.
Yay!
No, I was gonna mention as well, your knowledge base is just incredible. And I've been around the district for the better part of 3 decades. And one of the things that I've seen lacking in the past is procedures when things go wrong. Our district has always had a big heart, but the problem we've had is sometimes when people go astray, we don't have the processes and procedures, and we've run into a lot of problems because of that. We've had lawsuits which have gone, been very
Haywire.
expensive. We've had people behaving poorly in positions of responsibility, and there hasn't been any kind of consequences, and our students have suffered. So, like they mentioned before, you're in a very difficult position. I see the result with the yin and yang between Michelle and Todd is that there is definitely the care and the affection, the heart for all, but there's also the understanding that we're not going to tolerate misbehavior. There's going to be slip-ups, and that's understandable, but if there's things that are truly unacceptable, we now have an infrastructure that will make sure that we follow through and make sure our students are getting the best possible. So I appreciate that.
Well said. Well said.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 10.10 Personnel Services. Approval to extend the Chief Business Official, CBO, contract of employment, June 30th, 2022 to June 30th, 2024. Fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first, Natalie's our second. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54953, Subdivision C3, the Board provides this oral summary of the recommended 2-year extension to the Chief Business Official, CBO, contract of employment. The term of the amended employment contract between Rim of the World Unified School District and Chief Business Official, CBO, Jenny Haberlin, shall be from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2024. The change in the annual salary is due to the 1.5% management salary schedule change that was approved at the June 11, 2024 meeting per her contract. There are no other elements of compensation. And I'll start this one off, yeah. Jenny, like Natalie said to Todd, we so appreciate you being able to give us the bad news that sometimes we have to face. I've heard from other districts And I've seen the nightmares from other districts that happen when there's a chief business official in place that isn't up to the task or somehow is misleading, members of the community. And all I've ever heard from other school districts is praise for your job and what you've been doing. I've heard it from the county level. Your numbers are always spot on, and they're ever changing. From our last board meeting when you were presenting, here's the absolute worst case scenario that we're looking at for the future. Here's the second worst case, the third worst case, and here's maybe a break-even type of analysis. The ability to be able to process and go through all of those budgetary changes that affect the entirety of the school district. We're talking about an over $30 million annual budget. It's a lot of work to go through, and produce a document like this, and you just look at how thick it is. We just have to go through it. You have to live it every day, in and out, and to be able to know those numbers is just immensely helpful to our district. Cindy said it about Todd, and the same goes to you. You've saved this district money, and it's important, I think, as with Michelle, as with Todd, and the same with you, to keep a consistency in leadership. Leadership takes, in order to make positive impacts, it takes a long time for leadership to see the fruits of those labors. Michelle's been here a few years, you've been here longer, but to have a team like that in place and to be able to go forward together is really what's beneficial to our school district in overall. And again, I just go back to the nightmares that I hear from other school boards, where they have school board members that are actively working to undermine one another. They have school boards that are actively working to undermine district administration and vice versa. And to be able to see that type of anger and vitriol happen in other districts, it's no wonder that some other districts like that are spinning their wheels. And it's really wonderful to see that we have a board and a governance team overall that can work together and move forward together. Because again, without it, a district will just spin its wheels. So thank you.
I would say, I think, Jenny, what you help add to the team is obviously a great wealth of knowledge, and also a knowledge of our history throughout the district that some of us don't have. And I think it's great to be able to rely on you for that. For those who don't know, would be outside people, all of us know how extremely hard Jenny works and how committed and passionate she is about doing the best job she can possibly do, and that is not in question by any of us ever. I mean, we know how hard you work, and we see it, and we appreciate it. You are a naturally approachable person, and I appreciate that about you. It's very easy. I try not to abuse the privilege, but if I need to get even a quick text or a quick phone call to get an answer about something that just popped into my head, you are so responsive, always kind, always in a good mood despite having to deal with difficult things. You approach it pretty darn positively, and I need that sometimes because we all can get doom and gloom sometimes, and I know you feel those pressures, but you do try to bring lightness to it, which is helpful too. So I appreciate all of your hard work and hope you'll stay forever too.
Leslie had a comment?
Yes, Leslie does. Jenny, can I see your face? I want to see.
The whole thing.
Where are you? You have been working for the district as long as I have been on the board, actually beforehand. And your consistency, your loyalty, and your genuine ability to be able to transmit information that can be very complicated but make it understandable to me, a non-math person, has been greatly appreciated. I have found you to be always friendly. And it's a very interesting blend to be friendly but professional at the same time. You were very well balanced is what I'm trying to say. Knowledgeable, friendly, professional, you've got all the bases covered, and I'm
Cutting out, but probably
in
not
awe
something.
of you.
Hmm. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
I don't know what to add. But honestly, I was going to mention that I think it's highly unusual for somebody who is so deep into the numbers to be so approachable and have a strong desire to teach. So again, I talked about yin and yang, but we've got, with your history in the district, your understanding of where these numbers have come from, because there are a lot of wonky things that we have that have somehow ended up in the budget because of historical decisions that are kind of hard to understand sometimes. You have that background knowledge, you're able to explain it, you're unflappable. I mean, when you're, 10% budget cut, you're still smiling and trying to figure out how are we going to get through this. So it helps us maintain our calm and figure out, okay, what are our next steps? Where I have to imagine that there are quite a few folks that are in the same position as you in other districts that are probably bald at this point from tearing their hair out. And so just the calm, your pleasant demeanor, your approachability, not to mention your strong attention to detail, we highly benefit from all of that. So thank you.
Okay, so I want to go last. Your loyalty to this district is unmeasurable. You graduated from here, you started from the bottom here and have worked your way up. You love this district. And you could go anywhere and get a job for so much more money with your integrity, honesty, your transparency, and your wanting to educate people to the best of their ability. As John Gray has said, you're a treasure, and we're really lucky to have you. And I just have to say that you're my rock. I mean, we've been through a lot together, and you've been my rock. You've been there when it was a struggle, and you were there with encouragement and my person I could lean on during that time. And so I personally have to say thank you so much. And as for you, when I first started on the board, you really made it possible to sit down with you and discuss the entire flippin' budget and the previous stakeholder committee's straw design and go through years of what cuts we did and what we didn't. And you spent hours with me getting me up to speed on the history of where we are. And like I do with Heather, I ask a million questions. How far can I push a Title I expenditure? And both of you will give me yes, you can do that. Cindy, rein it back, sister. You're in the gray. Come on back. And so I just appreciate the fact that you are quick with your responses when I need to get information from you. I know exactly how to spend every budget code now because of you, but mostly I want to personally just thank you for sticking it out through all those rough times and being the person that I could go. No. So thank you so much, personally, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for staying, and thank you for really being a friend too.
With that, we'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 10.11, Educational Services. Approval of the single plan for student achievement, SIPSA, for Charles Hoffman, Lake Arrowhead, and Valley of Enchantment Elementary Schools, Mary P. Henk Middle School, Rim High, and Mountain High Schools for the 2020-21 school year. Fiscal impact, none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first.
I'll second.
Dan is our second. Discussion.
I just want to thank everybody, all the principals and all the site councils that worked on their plans. That's a lot of work. thank you for Jenny and for Heather on all the guidance for getting those plans and making sure they're in alignment with LCAP in the budget.
Yeah, those SIPSOs do take a lot of work from the school site councils, and yeah, especially if you have these N2. So this is excellent.
And being patient when I go, can you pay for this? No, no, I can't.
I did last year.
Figure it
but
out.
no.
Any other discussion? We'll call for the vote on this. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 10.12, Educational Services, approval to update Board Policy BP 6146.1, instruction, to reflect changes and detail in graduation requirements for RIM High School, Mountain High School, and Independent Study. Fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first,
A second.
Dan is our second. Discussion?
Just excited as a parent.
Todd, can you give us a quick synopsis of what this board policy is for people that might not know?
Sure, just a couple things on here. One was the removal of the health requirement for students to graduate. It was probably one of the biggest things that we started looking on. That did come up also from RTA, and so it was in collaboration with RTA, the discussions they brought forth. And so we had a chance to really look at this and see, how viable is the health part of it. Found out that really what helps out more so for our students is to have an additional elective course that'll be closer to the A through G requirements. And so this really helps them a lot more. In addition, what we did not have in our previous policy is anything for Mountain High School or independent study. So this actually puts in those two areas because they have different forms of graduation requirements. This adds that in there as well. So now, and it's also a lot more detailed than we had originally.
So, some feedback I got from some staff that I just was hoping that you might be able to address was concern about with the health requirement being dropped, that potentially some students may not get some necessary guidance. I understood that maybe PE would be providing such instruction. Is there any, was there anything about that, or is there, any way of filling those holes
And science.
in science? Okay.
Right, so yeah, it's not stated in here, but we do, there are requirements that we have to complete by the state. It doesn't say if you have a health class to do it, but those requirements can be incorporated within either PE or within the science instruction.
And so with that, we will be hitting all of those requirements without having a specific semester-long class.
Correct, yes.
Cool, okay.
It's tangential to board policies, but along the lines that when we do update these board policies, we submit them to Gamut, our online management system, but it often takes Gamut a good while to update our board policies that we send to them. Is that accurate? What's the current timeline that it usually takes them?
That's definitely a
Yeah.
good question.
Right now, they've been taking about 30 days to do so, but they're changing, so hopefully with the change, it'll be quicker.
Okay, that's good to know.
As a parent, thank God. Thank God for the change.
I agree.
Uh,
My kids
any
are a
oth-
little bit bitter though.
Change it too late, right? My kids will get advantage, take advantage of it.
So let's make sure that it's also reflected that we added, that we invited Connie Sanchez to the conversation.
Sanchez.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Anyway, any other discussion? If none, calling for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 10.13, Business Services, approval to adopt the district's proposed 2020-2021 budget, fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first.
I'll second.
Who's that?
Dana.
Dana, thank you. All right, discussion.
Thank you, Jenny,
Thank you, Jenny.
and to your department.
With the understanding that this is all dependent upon what the state actually provides to us.
And what happens? Federal lands.
Yeah, and so that's where you're gonna be working double time and all of that, because that's how you make it work. But yeah, no, we understand that this is a document that is valid today.
Well, that's well put. I think we've gone over our budget in detail, over our last couple board meetings. We had our public hearing on it as well. Any other last minute questions, again, I think, Dana, you hit it nail on the head there. We'll go ahead and call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 10.14 Business Services, approval of resolution number 19/20-19 for fiscal solvency and commitment to reduce expenditures in the current and subsequent fiscal years, fiscal impact to be determined.
So moved.
Cindy's our first, Natalie's our second. Discussion. Something that we do every year. It's just we have to commit ourselves to finding ways to reduce our expenditures. We are in a declining enrollment environment, as is most of the state of California, and every district has a fiduciary responsibility to find ways to live within our means until, fingers crossed, CSBA's full and fair funding proposal passes, if ever.
We're deficit spending.
Yes, that's also important to note. And the budget committee is working to address that structural deficit
Right,
spending.
we know it's gonna take a couple of years to get that deficit down, and there's a
The number
commitment
off.
to work on it.
Do we have a number off?
We do have a number off. 10.13 was actually the response to COVID LCAP written operations report that was submitted by Heather. So the numbering on this agenda doesn't match the actual agenda. So there were 15 items in action, and your agenda is showing 14. But there are actually 15 items in the
Oh, I have it.
Agenda that was sent to us.
I just
I
pulled
have
it up,
that.
yes.
Yeah,
I have that, yeah.
okay, so.
So I think it was just in the annotated, yes? Can I say that?
Okay, so let's go back to 10.13
Yes,
and read it from the computer. Read
absolutely.
it online, Jordan, and we'll go back.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and jump back there. 10.13, Educational Services, approval to adopt Rim of the World Unified School District's 2020-21 COVID-19 Operations Written Report for the Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP. Fiscal impact, none.
So moved?
We have Cindy as our first,
I'll second.
and we have Dana as our second.
Thank you for the creation of it.
10.13, I have it recorded here. Yes, absolutely. Heather, would you mind just explaining quickly that, this isn't our LCAP in its entirety. This is a little different because of COVID.
So due to the campus closures, the
Yeah,
LCAP was postponed until December 15th of 2020. So we will be continuing with the LCAP cycle, but it has just been postponed. And in lieu of that, we were asked to provide a written report in response to the COVID pandemic that is to be submitted with the budget instead of the LCAP.
Thank you. And any other discussion? We'll go ahead and call for the vote on the real 10.13. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. With that, we did approve 10.14. We mistakenly labeled it as 10.13. And we are in the midst of discussing 10.15. Do we want to reopen that one for discussion? It was, we had the first by Cindy Gardner and a second by Natalie.
Just, I think the last comment was that we're in deficit spending, declining enrollment, and we have a budget committee that's working on addressing the deficit as well as seeking, cost savings and actions for reallocation, reorganization, cuts, all those things. And so,
In addition to ways to increase revenue, like how can we increase enrollment, like our Saturday school programs that
And
have been
home
initiated.
choice.
Home choices programs. So a lot of things coming out of budget committee. It's not all doom and gloom. It's also what can we do to help enhance revenue. It's often a thing that school districts don't have a lot of control over, but where there is a small amount of control, the budget committee is finding ways to leverage it and implement.
And the 7-Eleven.
7-Eleven committee.
The
yeah.
7-Eleven committee is going again, which is the committee to look at our surplus property and our facilities and bring recommendations to the board. And again, I'm really excited that there's some flexibility in use of our in sale of district property. So I'm excited about that little.
Alphonse, do you know, I know that's part of what the current budget that's been discussed by the governor, but is there a deadline in terms of having that flexibility that is involved with that?
You have to read the.
Yeah, I think it's all for, it's for the current budget cycle, which is, so anything beyond that.
June 30th, 2021.
Yeah, it's the current budget cycle.
Okay,
So we would need
To
those
move
things to
quickly.
take place this school year,
okay.
this next.
But it
So
gives you
y'all want it
hope.
to move quickly.
Because, I mean, to be honest, if you read the newspapers, they're projecting that it's gonna take California itself at least 3 years to recover at this point in time. So with that, that is going to impact the education funding, so we might see some of these kinds of relief. Maybe, you know, a one-time, from non-Prop 98 monies to pay down STRS and PERS. Maybe it is this kind of thing, these little, because it doesn't cost legislators or the budget to give this little flexibility, to give this little, yay! So, and Jim's like, yeah, don't touch my budget. Okay, he's like, no, I get to have some flexibility.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote on 10.15 here. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 11.0 consent calendar. Items pulled for separate vote and discussion to be taken into consideration during agenda item 12.0. Do you have anything that we wanted to pull?
11.7.
11.7 and 11.8.
We have 11.7, 11.8.
Where is it?
I'll give everyone a second to go through.
Yes, please do. I had it in front of me and then, oh, there it is. 11.9.
11.9. Is there any, I think you pulled the ones I wanted to. Yep. Okay. So with that, we will be voting on 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, 11.4, 11.5, 11.6, 11.10, 11.11, and 11.12. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Cindy's our first.
Second.
Leslie is our second. Discussion? If none, calling for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
The numbering's off on that too.
Hold on.
Oh, let's go ahead and review that.
So the public posted agenda has 11.11 items, and the annotated has,
11.12.
so I'm just wondering,
Which one got added?
the COVID-19, 11.5, see that, 11.5 on the annotated should have been 10.15, or 10.13, or whatever it was.
Okay.
So it was put in
Oh, so
consent.
put
Because it
everything
was,
on.
yeah, it was removed from the consent and put under action, and it wasn't taken out of the annotated.
So I just wanna make sure we get everything covered, so.
So which one?
So 11.5 was already covered
Yes, it was
in
already covered, it was.
10.4,
Okay.
14 or whatever.
13, yeah.
Okay, so we'll scratch that out. So then, so 11.6.
But the public posted agenda is correct,
Correct.
it's the annotated one that's
Yeah.
off.
So let's go ahead and revise what, the items that were pulled
Or 6,
were
7,
actually
and 8.
11.6,
6.
11.7, and 11.8.
Well, what the public would see is that, starting with the Lake Arrowhead PTA school gift?
Mhm.
Yes.
That's the one that, okay.
That's 11.6.
Okay,
Right.
I'm just
So
making
they
sure.
were all off by one number.
Mhm.
What we voted on, just for clarity's sake, was 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, 11.4, 11.5, 11.9, 11.10, and 11.11.
There you go.
And again, the items we pulled were 11.6, 11.7, and 11.8.
Good job, Joel.
It's
Okay,
okay, it happens.
that's all right, just a little bit of a typo. So we'll move forward to 12.0, items removed from the consent agenda. Item number 11, I'll read it from over here on my screen here. 11.6, business services, approval of the Lake Arrowhead Elementary PTA annual school gift of school beautification with the Leader in Me focus. Fiscal impact not to exceed $30,000, donation.
So moved.
Cindy's our first,
I'll second.
and Dan is our second.
And I pulled it because I need to abstain from the vote.
Did you write the check?
I will. Just because of my role in PTA and the fact that this donation is coming from PTA to do some beautification, which I'm super excited about.
Are you painting again?
We are painting, the intention is to redo the entire school internally with the Leader in Me focus. And it's going to be a student-driven initiative to the best of our ability, where they will be creating and picking designs, and they will be helping do the beautification. So with COVID-19, how we're going to do that safely is obviously something we have to consider. But we, for as long as I've been on PTA at LAE, beautification has really been our drive and push. And now we're working in conjunction with the principal and the teachers who have decided to adopt the Leader in Me, and we want to they have toured some schools that are Leader in Me schools where their murals are up, and it's just part of the school community. It's not like these big reminders of following the Leader in Me. It's just, since it's everywhere, it's the fabric of the school and what the kids are talking about as they go through their elementary experience there. So
Hey, let me know how you guys are going to do the whole painting, because Run High PTSA is continuing to paint the hallways, and we're having the same discussion about we're using students obviously to help paint and community and everything like that, but we're going to have to change how we do it, and community can't really get onto our campus if we're doing real serious mitigation. And so we're having
There's
the
lots to
same
say, yeah.
conversation, so we should be talking.
we'll do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, big thank you to LAE PTA, I think.
Yes.
We'll call for that vote. All in favor? Any opposed?
Just one station.
And one abstention. So let's record that. We have, that decision was 4 ayes, and that was Jordana Ridlin, Cindy Gardner, Jordan Zarate, and Dr. Leslie Bramson. No nays, but we did have one abstention from Dr. Natalie Lindemann. So the motion carries. Moving on to item 11.7, business services, approval of contract with Right Way Roof Corporation for the partial roof replacement at Lake Gregory Education Center. Fiscal impact not to exceed $150,840. District Office Fund 40. We have a motion.
So moved.
Cindy's first, Natalie's our second.
And I like pulling Jim's stuff, so that's why I pulled
He
it.
can actually take his mask off and talk to us if he wants.
May I invite Jim to the discussion just to give us a little update on what he's going to be doing, and then maybe Jenny can chime in on where the money's coming from, please.
Yes, let's invite Jim Zimmer and Jenny Haberlin to this discussion.
The Lake Gregory roof is completely shot. We can't put Band-Aids on it anymore. So if we don't do something with it, we're gonna have more internal damage than we can afford. So we can't afford to do it all this year, so we took the half of it, because there's a big seismic joint at that school. We're gonna do half of it this year, and then hopefully
What kind
half
of
of it next.
what kind of internal damage has been? Is there any at this time that is significant? to be
Not
concerned
significant.
about?
The ceiling tiles and some of the carpet's starting to get,
Water
Some water
left?
damage.
Okay. Where at in that school?
I think the left side, depending on how you're looking at it.
Top.
If I'm
Floor.
looking at the school,
I think it's the left,
okay.
What would be the timing in terms of getting the work done?
before the rain.
Yeah, okay, so there's, yeah, that's what I'm.
We have to wait, you know, cause they're in their summer prime right now, but he says before the rain season for sure.
Okay.
Rain
Will
season.
it affect any of the, park and rec or people that are utilizing the facility at this time? Okay.
They don't use upstairs.
Right.
It's important
Should
to
it?
note that we as a district, even though that school site's technically closed, we do have a legal obligation to keep all of our facilities maintained. And
Well, we also have the agreement with the park district, and
Mhm.
we have to be good custodians of the facility.
Absolutely, and at the end of the day, it is district property. If the 7-Eleven committee made any types of recommendations to ever sell that type of building, for example, it would be in our best interest to have it in the best condition possible.
Or use it, for example.
Or use it,
we could-
exactly. So there's a lot of, you know, I understand that it's a lot of money, but at the same time, the upkeep of all of our facilities is really important for us as a school district. We can't let it slip. And now that Jim's been here at the district, he's made sure that a lot of our facilities aren't slipping through the cracks as much as our budget seems to allow.
And to highlight what we talked about in the last meeting is that Jim has created a plan for all of the elementary schools
To
to
do
be
this.
getting this done. It's just a matter of timing and money, but there is a plan in place, so everyone will get the attention that they desperately need, in time.
CG.
So it seems like if we wait any longer to do this, it's going to get incredibly more expensive,
This particular one, yes,
so it's.
and that's why we're doing the worst side.
The worst side first.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So Office Fund 40, District Office Fund 40?
Yes. So Fund 40 is the district's capital outlay fund, and the majority of those dollars have come to the district through AQMD grants, which were reimbursable grants when the bus yard CNG station was built. That was co-funded with Measure W, and then a few years later, because some departments, you know, kind of fund back their share of the program, you know, it's not always timely when the districts get their money. So when we got reimbursed from AQMD for the CNG station, the Fund 40 is the appropriate form per county and state guidelines where that revenue came into. So besides some interest and maybe some residual amounts from maybe 20 years ago when Fund 40, you know, it had a little bit more activity and in it from other sources, and that was before me. That was the majority of where these funds originated from, and they can only be used for capital outlay on a facility base. It could be used for equipment if we were to do some major infrastructure work also that was capital in nature. So, and that would be maybe recabling a whole school versus just buying some access points. One would be a capital expenditure, one may not be.
Yeah.
So that's where the funding is coming for. We do, the quotes to re-roof the entire school were a little bit more than double. And at this point, we thought it was prudent not to fully expend that fund in case we needed it for other things. And we can, going into next school year, we can see what other facility funds become available. Is there another need other than the other side of that roof that we have an immediate need to use? You know, the estimated remaining balance will be around $200,000. So, and then I don't foresee, unless before the flexibility for surplus property, if we were to sell, it was the selling of Mary Tone was the other piece of that money. When we sell property, the Fund 40 would be the fund that would receive that revenue. And so with the flexibility, you know, we would have a choice whether to put a portion of it in a protected fund like that for facilities or let it all fall into general fund.
With the
Protected.
redesignation,
Right,
with the
Jim.
redesignation.
He wants it
of the
protected.
budget.
Yeah, and but you can also put it, I don't want to get off tangent, but if we did sell a property, and you didn't want to utilize Fund 40, you could, when we discussed the reserve balances at the budget hearing, we talk about what we've assigned and unassigned. There's two other designations that we don't use, and that's committed. You can formally commit funds also, and it's a little bit tougher to uncommit those. So we would, if we, sell property and and use those provisions, we would have conversations on, do we want to commit any of those dollars, or not?
So I'm taking off a little tangent here. The money the insurance money from Grandview, would that be a Fund 40 situation?
No, that was a Fund 1.
Okay.
So that's that was part of the presentation last week, in the reserve balances that we talked about
Yeah.
and that would be also up for, depending on what the fallout is with the governor's budget, do some of those balances stay as just a reserved for now? That's really, you can decide day to day what to do, or you can formally assign them. And then it would take board action to assign them, board action to unassign them.
So that fund balance, Fund 40 has somewhere a little around 430,000 right now, is that correct?
Yeah.
So this budget, so it'll take a little bit of, you said, it'll bring us down quite a bit. But it is important to especially have good facilities.
And roofs are the most important.
Yes, a good roof over
And
overhead.
if I can add too, when the first round of Measure W project started, and I wasn't in my position at the time, most schools had a re-roofing project done, and Lake Gregory was not one of them because of its pending closure at the time. There was some work that was not done at Lake Gregory because the discussions were to close Marytown and Lake Gregory.
So this is a long time coming. Any other discussion? Okay, with that, then we'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. We move on to 11.8, Business Services. Approval of the addition of a coronavirus addendum to all use of facility applications, fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first,
Second.
Natalie's our second. Discussion.
Would appreciate just an explanation of what that addendum is going to include, and what it, to make sure that anybody who is looking at a facilities application understands what's going to be required of them.
That to me.
I don't know, Todd or you,
It
or?
was, if you want to do that.
It's yours.
Okay, then.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Having an addendum to our facility use was a recommendation by our risk management group and JPA, to have some acknowledgement for when we do start opening our sites to people who use our facilities, that they have an expectation of following the state guidelines, that we're going to limit our use, and so an example would be field use, where field use, sometimes if it's during the week and a custodian is there, people are used to going into the building, maybe utilizing the facilities, and then really shielding us from some liability on folks who use our facilities, and maybe one of their participants gets ill, hopefully not, we don't want that to happen, while doing something that we don't have necessarily control over. This is holding the district a little, and of course anyone can always sue at any time, but it holds us harmless to an extent, and to have that expectation that if the user is signing this addendum, that they're up to date on the state laws and the county laws, and they have a plan in place. And that the expectation would be, if we incur extra costs, we can pass some of those off. I think I misspoke earlier when we talked, when we spoke. And then to let perhaps a free user now know that because we can't control everyone on campus, so if someone was using our campus and we had to do extra cleaning, the district shouldn't bear that expense. So we're reaching out to people who have already filled in facility use agreements and are kind of waiting for this, that this will be a requirement if the board passes it tonight, to have that acknowledgement. because we need to protect ourselves, we need to protect the deep cleaning that's going on and keep at least the interior of our campuses closed until we can feel comfortable that we've promised to do on the custodian side what we're telling our parents and community and the state. It's an OSHA requirement that we do deep cleaning this summer. And so limiting some use and controlling it is a way for us to ensure that we are doing what we're telling parents in the state and the county what we're doing.
So by approving this, that would then trigger accepting facility requests and approving them.
So this is our
Starting
first
now.
step to being able to open.
If they complete that paperwork.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
It's our first step to opening up for the public
For the
use.
public use, okay.
There will be an expectation of higher scrutiny though, of use, of knowing, especially when schools open, what type of commingling will be done, if a group's on our campus, the same type of students, you know, we will have to take every use, with a little more scrutiny, so we limit exposure. And then we can also trace if we do have someone, you know, in a group that tests positive, we know that we didn't expose one of our staff or students because of a outside user group.
Now, I would say Cindy and I are we're people on the board who fill out facility requests and facility use requests all of the time. So, from at least my perspective, and you can probably add, it would be really helpful, not only if the guidelines do have expectations of those extra things that aren't necessarily guidelines, but what other factors we need to take in place when we are filling out those forms, if that makes sense.
Okay. I think it's broad enough too that it lists here that you go to the San Bernardino County COVID.com, the CDZ, and the CA.gov, and you're following the recommendations that they're putting out.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be what you're signing, that you made yourself aware of what your group is allowed to do.
So is this gonna be somehow included in our lease agreement with Rim Parks and Rec?
The Rim Parks and Rec is a joint use agreement, so they're not subject to this, and so that will be other discussions that we'll need to have with them on an amendment to their joint use.
Well, I've met with them, they have their own guidelines to follow, just like us, that include their organization as far as COVID guidelines, so she's following them.
Okay.
I've met with her personally.
So, I know it kind of tangents a little bit, from the actual addendum, but, I mean, like PTA, our board, that goes on campus on a regular basis to conduct PTA business, I mean, for Rim High PTA, we have a requirement that our board has to get the badge to identify them as PTA, so that it's easier to go on campus, to sign in with security, you know, that kind of thing, and that they can go access where they need to go to do the PTA business, because our PTA closet is in the 300 wing. So in terms of that kind of stuff,
That's really the volunteer,
But
I mean, because you don't sign a facility use agreement every time PTA is on campus. You're getting that access through the volunteer protocols.
right,
But
and
we do for our PTA meetings,
Yeah,
and we do
yeah,
for
and our other stuff.
assemblies, or, you know, which, again, we're not gonna be able to likely do this year, but maybe like a meeting is another example.
So what I guess I'm saying is that are we trying to make sure that that kind of monitoring goes on with who's going on to our campuses while students are there physically? It doesn't have really anything to do with the facility.
That's more a
use, but-
strategic
Yeah.
plan question,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
suppose.
And 1 week too, and we're hopefully it's done before school starts, but we're working on getting this addendum put onto the online form as more of a just initial, that
Okay.
you're aware of the CDC guidelines, and so almost like how you initial the hold harmless now,
Yeah.
this would eventually become part of that, maybe scroll down and a COVID section. And
So
then
right now, we're gonna do the online form and this form.
Yes. And then I think like Todd said, and one of them 6 months from now, or with a vaccine, or, this may become irrelevant.
Okay,
Okay. Think about it.
well, let's go ahead and call for that vote there. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 13.0, Governance Team Future Agenda Items Planning. 13.1, time allotted for the Board of Trustees to request agenda items for future meetings. Is there anything that we have requests other than what's already on our governance calendar?
No, for me.
I think we mention it every time, but we have a governance calendar that kind of orchestrates and lays out all of the things that are important for a school board to know, and agendize them accordingly for meetings. But we always offer this in case there's something else that's not on the calendar.
I said no, but now I have something to say, but it doesn't necessarily need to be an agenda item, because I could just ask that Michelle, in your superintendent's report, that you just update us on whatever changes are made to the strategic plan.
Yeah.
I don't think it needs to be its own agenda item.
Okay.
I actually, while you were talking, I thought of a potential agenda item is to schedule the time with trustees.
Oh,
we'll
we
talk-
do that
we're
within
doing
the
that at
media
the
committee.
retreat.
Within the media, okay, so, yeah,
And we're gonna be doing it at the retreat.
at the retreat, okay, just that I think there may be desire at this point.
Yeah, it'll be the time with trustees and all of our district events. We'll address them all.
We're gonna
Rework them. We might do
Rework.
virtual.
So that's
Yeah.
definitely a good thing to bring up.
just
Go
as a
ahead.
note, I was talking to Michelle after our last meeting, Connie, and this is really an additional meeting next May, is keep in the back of your mind that we really need to have a workshop in May that's focusing on the formal superintendent evaluation, so that we don't have just from 45 minutes to do her evaluation or go back into closed session and we're too tired. In June is an awful board meeting to do it. So we just need to add a workshop, and then that way we could also do our board self-evaluation process and setting the goals, and that way we're not taking literally 45 minutes and then trying to jam in too much. So just a note.
That's a good note.
I was tired.
Okay, well then, we'll move on to 14.0, future meeting dates. Board retreat, July 24th, 2020 at 9:00 a.m. in the Rim High School Library. Regular board meeting, August 20th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. in the Rim High School Library. We don't need to change any of those locations at this time. It'll be the first time that this board ever holds a board retreat, so that's very exciting. We're just going to, it's called a retreat, but it's at the library.
We're going
Really,
to Cancun.
it's a time for the board to reflect
Enjoy
on.
umbrella.
It's a time for the board to reflect on and plan out our own internal goals and what we want to accomplish as a board overall. It's very important for I would advocate for any school board to have an annual retreat of sorts like this, so I'm glad that we're doing it. 15.0, recess to closed session if necessary. That is not necessary today, so we'll move on to 16.0, adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:18.
I second that.
Okay, any discussion? None, we'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?